So in the previous lesson, when we were setting padding for these different elements, padding and margin are together. They're part of the box model of CSS, and you can actually see that within Chrome when we go over here and we do an inspect element. I just had to open that up a little bit more, but when we go over to our inspect element, we can see that we've got this kind of box here. So we've got our content in the middle in blue, we've got padding on the outside, we've got a border, and we've got a margin. So all of this is what's known as the box model. And the way that that works is it's just a boxed way of thinking about when you are creating your padding, when you're creating your border and your margin, and determining what to use when. So when we look at our padding is the first one that immediately surrounds the content, and this is actually going to push the content and the spacing of that boxed area around that content to be 10. So even if we had a border set up, which we can actually do right now as well, so I'm going to just set up a border there around each. And again, this is shorthand. So with borders, you've got the typical border width. You also have border color, and I believe it's border style. So these are the three typical ones that you would be using for borders. But usually right now most of the time I'm just using that shorthand method where I just do border and I include everything in there. So we include the color there. So I'm going to do a really bright color so it just stands out there. And here we're just going to pick solid. So we have a solid border for the style. And then for the border width, we're just going to do 1 pix. So now when I refresh it, we can see that now we've got these borders. So again, going back to the box model, we've got our content in the middle. So this page 1, page 2, page 3, these are all pieces of content that are in the middle. Then we've got our padding immediately after there. We've got our border immediately after there. And then after that, we've got our margin. So the margin is what sits on the outside. And going back, we see that our margin is 10 there. And that means that I haven't selected the right one there. So when I go inspect element, I see that the margin is 10. I've got a border, I've got my padding, and then the auto sizing of the content in the middle. And actually this, just as we were just looking at this, it can actually get fairly complex when you've got several different elements and sections of code and you've got margins, padding, and borders there. So sometimes they could move up and down, as we had in our previous lesson where these ones were floating above that initial box. So yeah, you have to always be mindful of how you're using these. And again, these are shorthand methods. So much like what we were looking at with backgrounds and much of what we just looked at with borders, with padding, we've got the option to do padding dash top and isolate out all of these different padding areas. So we've got padding right, padding bottom, and padding left. So you can actually isolate these all out and have them to have separate values. So I can do 9, 8, 7, 6, and going back out to here, selecting them, we can see that we do have this 9, 8, 7, 6 values. And when you are using the shorthand, so I'm just going to write this out in shorthand. And the reason that I did it within this order is because this is the order that the shorthand reads it in. So if I'm just going to bracket that out and do padding, you can see that, and do 9 pix, 8 picks, 7 picks, and 6 picks. So working clockwise from the top, I'm going to refresh this and reselect this particular element. We see that nothing has actually changed because the shorthand is the same thing. It's the same thing as going top and bottom and left and right, and again working clockwise. So you can do the same thing with margins as well. And there's also some more you can do with the shorthand here. So if you wanted to do top and bottom and left and right 8, so you want them all the same there, this is another way to do the shorthand. So we can do the top, bottom at 9 and the left and right at 8. And then going on, if you were to do actually 7, it would take top, bottom, and it would take right and left. So until there's 4 values, it's not going to actually use this one. It's going to use this one as the 4th value if it's not filled out. So that's how you do the shorthand. And the same thing with margins. Typically you could do your margin top, and then you could do margin right, and it's going to work in the same clockwise fashion. We could do margin bottom, and then margin left. So again, clockwise, and we're just going down, but you could set these values to whatever you want to set. And just gonna refresh this back one more time, just so that we can see the way that the margins are working. So margin 10, 9, 8, 7, and that's working around the page there in that fashion. And so if we even set these margins larger, actually it's going to be a little bit more prevalent there. So if we set the margins to those, we can see that those margins are actually taking place, but because we're encasing them in that navigation area, even though the margins are there, it's only taking these, it's redefining these margin values as what's available here. So again, when you're working with inside different sections that already have those margins, so if I was to take these out and apply them to something entirely separate, maybe I can just do it to this contact form. So maybe this way it's going to be a little bit more visible. So when we look at our contact form, we get our margins there that we are able to see. So selecting that out, we see that we do have this margins all the way around, and the margining is from that initial text that's atop there. And now even if we set 550, this is going to be a whole lot more visible, and now it's taking up 550 pixels of space at the top, and then left, right, bottom, and left. So again, margins on the outside, and we're just going to remove those for now. And going back, and I believe we had a margin of 10. So this was, again, that shorthand way of writing margins. So we're just going to do 10 pixels all the way around, refresh it, and have this applied to our navigation area. So again, because this is in another contained section and we don't have that much more space to work with, it's not able to actually reserve out that additional margining. So maybe this isn't the best example of where to use margins, but again, you have to think of it and within this box model that we do have our margin on the outside, border, padding, and then content. And doesn't matter how you're gonna write that within your HTML code. If you're using the shorthand, it's always going to be interpreted by the browser in this type of format.